Mercedes reveals major issues that stop them from challenging its rivals. Sergio Perez is under fire as we approach the Dutch GP, and the FIA clarifies on the updated rules. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Deemed not worthy of a Red Bull seat, Dutch pundit Tom Coronel claims Sergio Perez never recovered from declaring his F1 2023 title ambitions and getting a mega knockout. While F1 2024 started positively for Perez, who scored 3 runner-up results across the opening 5 rounds, his pace would soon tail off in an alarming way, to the point that he was at serious risk of being shown the Red Bull exit door over the summer break. With McLaren cutting Red Bull's Constructors' Championship lead to 42 points, Perez had only signed a new multi-year deal ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix, but Red Bull ultimately did not decide to part ways, retaining Perez for after the summer break, a decision from Red Bull which Coronel cannot understand. F1 2024 marked a change in approach for Perez who, unlike in previous years, did not talk up his ability to mount a title challenge against 3-time world champion teammate Max Verstappen. But Coronel claims the failed 2023 title challenge is a setback which Perez has not gotten over. Despite coming in as runner-up in the standings, Perez was a huge 290 points behind Verstappen in the final standings. It's silly to keep shooting at the same person every time, but yes, I have no choice. He really does it all to himself anyway, Coronel said of Perez to Formula 1 Nell. Last year he was still shouting he could become world champion. Then he got back a mega knockout on the nose and he never got over that. Indeed, it only seems to be getting worse. With him, it's all just not. And that means you should be in a B team, not an A team. I still don't understand why they gave him a new contract. Bizarre. He is not Red Bull worthy. Not as a person and certainly not as a driver. He proves it again and again, results and standings don't lie. For me, Perez is a big fail. This is no longer justifiable. With the F1 2024 campaign set to resume with the Dutch Grand Prix, Perez said he is feeling refreshed by the summer break. And he will have a different race engineer in his ear, as Hugh Bird temporarily steps aside on paternity leave. Richard Wood, a performance engineer with Red Bull for 11 years, steps up as Perez's race engineer. I am looking forward to getting back in the car this weekend, said Perez. The summer break was very important for everyone in the team and the whole sport. With so many races now, everyone needs the rest and reset time more than ever. I spent my time in Mexico with family and I feel refreshed and ready to go for the second half of the season. I know all my team feel the same. I have been in Milton Keynes this week with them. Everyone will notice a change on the radio on our side of the garage in Zandvoort. Hugh, my race engineer, is expecting a baby very soon, so we'll be spending some time at home, and I wish him and his family the best of luck with their new arrival. Woody, my performance engineer, will step up in the meantime. I know what we can extract from the car in the coming weeks, and we will do our best to maximize the second half of 2024. Sky F1 commentator David Croft believes team orders are on the way at McLaren in the second half of the F1 2024 season, with Oscar Piastri tipped to suffer alongside Lando Norris. After the F1 2024 campaign began with the Max Verstappen and Red Bull dominance trend continuing, the situation has since changed drastically, with 7 winners crowned across the opening 14 races. But is this type of variety set to dry up a little in part 2 of the season? 10 rounds remain of the season, and it is Norris who stands as the closest Drivers' Championship challenger to Verstappen, with the McLaren driver currently 78 points behind. Yet Piastri is the most recent McLaren victor, scoring a maiden Grand Prix victory in Hungary as he continues to go from strength to strength. However, Croft believes we are 2 or 3 races away from team orders at McLaren, with Piastri the one to be placed into a supporting role for Norris. Let's look at this strategically. I think we're 2 or 3 races away from team orders here, and team orders being imposed regularly, Croft said on the Sky F1 podcast. Whereby, if Oscar is second to Lando in that McLaren battle, the team will say, Oscar, you're driving for your teammate because we need to prioritize him. Croft expects team orders to come into play more widely among the leading teams, but while Sergio Perez playing the supporting role to Max Verstappen at Red Bull is his role, Croft feels Mercedes and Ferrari could encounter trickier situations, considering they each have a driver who leaves after this season, Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz going to Ferrari and Williams respectively. Sergio knows his role. That's always been second to Max ever since he signed for the team, really, Croft continued. Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, and Carlos are a little bit closer together, and that's maybe a more difficult task, especially with one of them leaving. And that could be the same at Mercedes because you've got George Russell and Lewis and a team going great guns at the moment, but who do you say gets priority there? George will want to have that priority. Should have won Spa, but for being underweight, and that wasn't his fault, wasn't the team's fault. It's just one of those things that happens there. But Lewis benefited to the extent that he went and then picked up the win, his second win in the space of 3 races. What's the difference between Lewis and George? It's 34 points in the championship. Lewis should get priority if Mercedes are going to do team orders, but they're normally the last team that wants to do team orders. They want to give both drivers an equal chance. Lewis is probably a little bit too far away to seriously think about winning that driver's championship, but give it 2 or 3 races. If the lead of Max's is chipped away, then I think we start to see team orders and we'll get less variety. We'll see teams going, right, Lando is our main man, Lewis is our main man, Charles is our main man. And that will then solidify things a little bit more. And should these team orders come to be, Croft believes this will shine the spotlight even brighter on Red Bull's decision to retain Perez for after the summer break, following an alarming slump in form. With McLaren now only 42 points behind in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull had been seriously upping the pressure on Perez to return to form. But could a team like McLaren relieve said pressure a little if Norris became the clear focus? Red Bull's decision not to replace Sergio Perez could be even more critical, because the teams then focus on one driver, not both, that are challenging Red Bull, Croft concluded. The F1 2024 campaign resumes this weekend with the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, Verstappen's home event, which he has won every year since it returned to the F1 calendar in 2021. The FIA has denied accusations that wording recently added to F1's technical regulations was a response to any team using a prohibited braking system. It was believed that one of the teams may have employed an asymmetrical braking system, and that the move by the governing body was to prevent similar approaches in the future. Ahead of the change, Article 11.1.2 of F1's technical regulations read, "The brake system must be designed so that within each circuit, the forces applied to the brake pads are the same magnitude and act as opposing pairs on a given brake disc." Following the most recent FIA World Motorsport Council meeting, further text was added to the clause, which was ratified by all the F1 teams. That additional wording was, "Any system or mechanism which can produce systematically or intentionally asymmetric braking torques for a given axle is forbidden." Over the summer break, this provoked a flurry of speculation that the focal point of the clampdown was Red Bull, who, according to Racing News 365 sources, did have a now-removed braking system in place up until the Chinese Grand Prix. Although that, in essence, constituted an asymmetrical braking system, it is believed to have been within the confines of the regulations, if perhaps not within the spirit of them. Why it was removed for the Miami Grand Prix remains unclear, but there have been suggestions the system could have been linked to Max Verstappen's retirement in Australia. According to Motorsport.com, high-level sources at the FIA have stated that the change was not prompted by something a team was currently doing, but rather it was to future-proof the regulations, as F1 heads towards a comprehensive new rulebook in 2026. There is no truth that any team was using such a system, an FIA spokesperson told Motorsport.com. It is understood that the decision to add the wording to the current regulations was at the behest of the F1 teams, who prevent competitors from exploiting any vagueness in the existing laws. The argument is that a technical directive, not a rules rewrite, would have been the correct and usual course of action if a team had been found foul of the regulations. Sky F1 commentator David Croft has said Red Bull find themselves in a positive but thorny situation, as their abundance of talent leaves them with more drivers than seats for next season. With the likes of Liam Lawson and Formula 2 championship leader Isaac Hadjar looking for a seat next year, and Sergio Perez under pressure for his drive but under contract for 2025, while there is talent knocking at the door for a drive in Formula 1. Croft pointed out that even if Perez does not see out his Red Bull deal, the team will likely have to pay him what he is owed after he signed a contract extension earlier this season. Alongside that, with Daniel Ricciardo and Liam Lawson the two favorites to step up to Red Bull, the commentator wondered if former Red Bull driver Ricciardo is doing enough to warrant a return to his former seat alongside Max Verstappen as it stands. But with that, though, It is a sign that despite it being a thorny situation for Red Bull to navigate, it shows they have plenty of talent from which to choose their race drivers. The thing is, Sergio is contracted for next year. He has a contract for next year, Croft explained on the Sky F1 podcast. So if Red Bull don't take him up on that contract, I'm assuming they're going to have to pay him, and I'm assuming that that's more money than Liam Lawson or Daniel Ricciardo. Assumptions on that one. I don't know the answer. So if you've got to pay off Sergio Perez, well, Liam Lawson's not going to attract a huge contract because you're paying out quite a bit already. And with Sergio, if Sergio is not driving, then that sponsorship money, does that still come to the team that he brings in, or do they lose that as well? Daniel Ricciardo. I hate asking this question because I love Daniel Ricciardo as a human being. I just think he's a brilliant guy, and as a racer, I think we have seen some brilliant moments, and I've thoroughly enjoyed watching and commentating on Daniel Ricciardo over the years. Is he, though, doing enough to warrant a promotion to Red Bull? That's a question I think you need all the data, you need to look at it, at all the scenarios, but is he doing enough? Is a man who scored 3 points finishes this season, who trails his teammate 9-5 in qualifying and is 10 points behind his teammate, is he doing enough to warrant a promotion? I'm not using this platform as a criticism of Daniel Ricciardo, but I can see where all the hesitation is over putting him in. Now, if it was me, I'd put Liam Lawson in, because I don't think you're going to have a worse situation on the track. But will Liam Lawson fit in with Max Verstappen, and will they be the teammates that Red Bull need? Will there be harmony between the two teammates? Is it better to put Daniel Ricciardo in because maybe he's going to be, I'm assuming once again, a more compliant teammate to a Max Verstappen, who is very much your number one driver. And Liam goes into the RB potentially because you wouldn't demote Sergio down to the RB because RB is meant to be the junior team that brings along the junior drivers. It's not just Liam Lawson, There's Isaac Hadjar as well that's coming through and doing well, and it's a bit of a thorny situation for Red Bull to try and solve, but it's a good situation because they've got an abundance of talent there, but it's a talent that isn't quite right at the moment. Because one person at the top isn't producing the results that he was at the start of the season and is demanded of him now. Mercedes trackside engineering director Andrew Shovlin says that the team still has to address weaknesses on the W15, citing high temperatures and rear-limited tracks as the key areas of focus. After a difficult start to 2024, the Brackley team made good progress as it brought developments to the car, winning 3 of the 4 races held prior to the summer break. Shovlin acknowledged that the team made important steps at the Miami and Monaco races in May, creating a base on which to build. We didn't really bring developments to the early races of the year, he said. So we started to pull forward developments with a new floor in Miami. We then pulled forward a front wing that was due later in the season. We had one on George's car in Monaco. I think by that point you could see that we had a car that was definitely one that you could work with and improve around that time of Monaco. And then what we have seen since then is a pretty impressive delivery of updates to every single track. As you sort of solve problems with the handling of the car, the challenge actually becomes simple, and you get more clarity about what you want to do next, he said. In the early part of the year, we had a car whose behavior would change wildly with relatively small swings in track condition. In Jeddah, we were bouncing badly in the high-speed corners. It's quite hard to unpick all those issues. Whereas if you look at tracks like Budapest, you'd say we're still putting too much temperature in the rear tires. And there's also just an element that we need to find a bit more base performance. The problems that you're dealing with as the car has got quicker have also become easier to see. Asked to clarify what issues the car still has, he said, the main remaining weakness is in hot conditions and rear-limited circuits. We're not as good as the McLarens or Max. We saw that in Budapest. We saw that in Austria. I think we've made progress there over the sequence of these recent races. But then everyone's trying to develop their cars. If you're not developing at a faster rate than the others, then you're quite quickly slip backwards. And so there's going to be a focus just on how much development you can bring, and we can only see a month or 6 weeks into the future, because that's the sort of horizon you're working with in your wind tunnel. What we don't know is, will we be able to keep delivering performance from the wind tunnel, from our vehicle dynamics group and mechanical design groups? Are they going to continue to be able to bring performance into the last part of the year? Hopefully, and we've got good ideas, but there's a lot of work to go through between having an idea and actually having physical parts that you can put on the car and make it go quicker. Chauvelin admitted that deciding how to split resources between the W15 and next year's car is an ongoing challenge. We're flat out trying to find performance, he said. Later on in the year, there have to be discussions around, is it this car, or does it wait for the next car? And the cost cap inevitably means that those discussions are a trade between performance gain and cost. We do want to be fighting at the front next year, so we're always going to make decisions that mean that that is a possibility. And then in terms of the wind tunnel, you've got the point at which you progressively shift resource from the current car to next year's car. I think probably every team has already started working on next year's car. But how rapidly you shift that resource over is a factor. But teams may find that what works on this car works on next year's anyway, or vice versa. So it's not like the challenge we'll have in 2026, where it's a completely different beast. Mercedes has reportedly accepted defeat on their hopes of Max Verstappen joining them from Red Bull for 2025, but F1 2026 is another matter. With Lewis Hamilton heading to Ferrari for F1 2025, creating a future Mercedes vacancy, and the off-track unrest at Red Bull early in F1 2024, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff publicly made his interest in signing Max Verstappen clear, confirming that he would love to bring the three-time world champion over from Red Bull. And while Red Bull began F1 2024 as still the dominant team, the tide has turned with McLaren and Mercedes reeling in their rival, Mercedes winning 3 of the last 4 races going into the summer shutdown. However, as per De Telegraph, Mercedes reached the conclusion over that summer break that Verstappen will not be Hamilton's replacement for F1 2025, backed up by several sources around that team. Instead, the publication adds that Mercedes junior Kimi Antonelli, a 2-time race winner in his rookie Formula 2 season and decorated champion on the junior racing scene, will be alongside George Russell at Mercedes next season. However, it is claimed that Wolff will reignite the Verstappen push next year, with certain performance clauses in Verstappen's Red Bull contract, running until the end of 2028, existing, which could open the door for such a move to Mercedes, with a major reset of the chassis and power unit regulations coming for F1 2026. Interestingly, Wolff had said after Mercedes made their return to winning ways via George Russell in Austria that it was only when Mercedes were battling for victories regularly again that Verstappen should consider joining the team. And I think this is a moment where we can say that we can be a harbor port or destination for the best drivers, including Max, Wolff continued, speaking to media including PlanetF1.com. But we're not there yet, so if I was him, I wouldn't be considering such a move yet. The F1 2024 campaign resumes at the weekend with Verstappen's home race, the Dutch Grand Prix at Circuit Zandvoort. Verstappen has not been defeated at the venue since it returned to the F1 calendar in 2021. With 10 rounds of the season to go, the Dutchman holds an 78-point lead in the Drivers' Championship over McLaren's Lando Norris, though McLaren are only 42 adrift of Red Bull at the top of the Constructors' Championship. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.